Good afternoon. How are you today? Well, it's 40 and kind of cold, even though the temperature is not so terrible. And that's because, as you can see to my side here, we have clouds, but we don't have a lot of sun. And maybe it just makes a difference psychologically. In terms of light striking in North Carolina, the Supreme Court there made a decision and issued an order, 4-3 decision, so a close decision, declaring the photo ID rules unconstitutional and requiring that they be changed. Now, some think the photo ID is not a big problem, and this is one of those questions of privilege, if you will. If you have photo ID, you can't appreciate how someone doesn't have it. But if you don't have a car, or if you have photo ID that's printed and aged and it doesn't show your address, well, there's a chance to be discriminated against. Years ago, I heard that Dominican nuns were upset because they didn't have the kind of ID that would satisfy their right to vote, but they had a right to vote. So that's an interesting problem. Now, here's the kicker. There's always a but in these situations, and the but is that it's a Democratic court by this 4-3 margin, and in January the court will flip narrowly the other way. So there's that problem. But for now, that's the result in North Carolina. Continuing down the line of good and bad decisions, McCarthy, he who would be the Speaker of the House of Representatives, is in a really tough situation because he needs 218 votes. His entire caucus of Republicans is 222. So he's got a margin of 4 votes that, if he had the support of the caucus, would do enough. But the Freedom Caucus is against him, and so there's kind of a stalemate right now, and it's not clear how he's going to clear it up. It's doubtful the Republicans are going to join with the Democrats to make a Democrat a speaker. So there's a little problem about the government going forward. But we haven't had the last chapter on that yet. As you know, I'm focused on COVID because of our family situation and because Holly's so immunosuppressed, but none of us really can be free of it. And one of the concerns we have is that the boosters reduced by 50% the chance of hospitalization. So you should get those. But there's an interesting thing going on internationally. I spoke about in Canada how Trudeau had trucks who were upset that anyone would require them to be vaccinated so that others could be safe, including themselves. In China's had big resistance to their lockdown policies, which were severe by any standard, and so they've relaxed them. The interesting phenomenon now is the people who seek to be safe are going to pharmacies and they can't get the basic medicines that one would use to counteract the chances of catching the damn COVID and avoiding some of the most severe possibilities that the boosters and vaccines can provide. So it's interesting. You give people what you want, and then the other people don't get what they need, and you have a crisis. And I suppose if the fact that we don't have the supply for the demand to be safe increases the chance to be dangerous to oneself and to one's community. Congratulations, world. We've done it again. Those Democrats who receive funds from that CryptoCon Bankman-Fried, well, they're giving the money back to charity in places like that because they don't want to be connected with a guy who probably was dipping into the till from his cryptocurrency claims in order to make these contributions. And as a vice president has been pretty active doing that in his organization. So what do we have to keep in mind? I have a fondness lately for reaching back into my early readings, which I do occasionally slip into. And Marcus Aurelius said about Vice that it was familiar, that it was a familiar sight. It was not new. And he's also one of the people that said there's nothing new in the world. And he said it in Greek. And I don't read Greek. I read and studied some of it many years ago, but of the toughest people to translate, it's Marcus Aurelius. And over the years, I've gotten these great books on the classics that are, we called them trots in school. Trots because they would help you speed up your translation, say, of a Latin passage. And Omnis Gaullus and Tres Partes, all Gaul is divided into 3 parts. Caesar, Erat, Imperator, Caesar's writings. But this kind of Latin is very difficult. But the principle of this difficult Latin is to say something really simple, which is, what are you talking about? You're so surprised by vice. How many times in the last several years have we heard some reporter or commentator or politician or leader say, I can't believe Trump did that? So instead of calling it what it is, a vice, they're scratching their heads wondering what it is. How could it be? It's a vice. Do people do things like that? And here's the rest of it. Throughout history, not only do we know what it was going back thousands of years, but we also know how to handle it. You fight it. Or you're overcome in the case of dictators, and that's because you didn't do anything soon enough. And we have exactly that challenge here in America. And I guess a final footnote, which is somewhat reminiscent of what I've been saying in various ways all along about the January 6th committee. On the one hand, my former employer and friend, Zoe Lofgren, she came out and said, what's the value of a referral? Why would we do that? And now apparently they're going to make a referral. And she may have been won over, or the facts may have won her over, and she's a brilliant woman, no question about it, and quite an accomplished legislator. But here's the difficulty of the January 6th committee, which may be too close to what they're studying. If you're going to make a referral and you're saying it's nothing, then it's nothing. If you're making a referral like you're the victim of a crime, then say it all. If you're not a prosecutor, then don't pretend to be a prosecutor and suggest the only kind of evidence that you could point to that would justify the crime you're talking about. So I'm beating around the bush a little bit here. What is the crime I'm talking about? It is sedition, seditious conspiracy. Now, these people are taking on themselves, though not a prosecutor, though not a grand jury, registering a criminal complaint with the world and with agencies of the government because the Hill was the victim. There they were going to overturn the government. There they were going to seditiously defeat our government so that a worthless individual who lost an election could seize power despite losing the election and taking it from Biden and from all the voters across America. That's a seditious conspiracy. Call it that. Don't back off. So let's not be surprised by vice, nor let us not be surprised by what it takes to fight vice, which is hard measures. Quickly done, that's gone. But done ultimately, that's our possibility. And I think, right, the legislature should not confuse who it is. But they have every right to make it a referral, a complaint, an outrage, and to say it loud and clear with the strongest possible language and not limit themselves to somebody interrupted a legislative proceeding. That's not what this is about. That's like a tenth of what it's about. They didn't come in and shout in the chambers. They came in to take over our government, to kidnap our speaker, to perhaps hang our vice president. People were killed. People were hurt. And maybe only because the vice president resisted being taken from the Hill. Sounds like a combat, doesn't it? Only because he did that were they able to have the vote that they sought to stop, then hoped to delay, but then Pence, and a credit to him, not a courageous thing, what he should have done, they had the vote, and our government continued. It was a shaky transition. It's intolerable. It should be the declaration of the January 6th committee that that's what's wrong with America. And that don't be lawyers about this. Complain in a summary format what all the crimes are and all the people. How could that not take 20 pages with Trump on every page in every subcategory of the conspiracy? Beats me. So here I am out in the Cathedral of Trees, immune from Trump, immune from the disease, the lying and so forth that's captured our world. And from this kind of thing, we draw the strength to beat the bastards. Bye-bye.